Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Stories with Sash podcast. You obviously join me, Sash, for another episode of motoring-related topics. And I've got a couple of guests on today. I mean, if you can call them guests now, maybe they might be regular features going forward. But you've met them before. It's Mike and Rob. Hello, chaps. How are we?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Yes, not too bad. Not too bad. Rob, are you okay over there?
Yeah, I'm good. How's
From
it going, gents?
sunny Abu Dhabi, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, actually, the weather has been, the temperatures have kind of fallen off a cliff this week, so it's now palatial here.
To be fair, it's the same over in the UK, actually, and Mike would agree on this. It's actually quite nippy out there today.
Freezing,
not gonna lie.
absolutely freezing.
It's. To be fair, go back a couple of weeks ago, and it was like 35 degrees. So it's crazy.
My idea of palatial is it doesn't hit. It only just touches 40 at midday now. But anyway.
Honestly, mate, I don't know how you put up with it like that. Just too cold, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's been really hot in the UK, like 60 degrees, you know.
Yeah. It's been tough over here. But to be fair, I think our summer is probably gone. But this sort of relates nicely as to, well, we'll just kick things off with what's everyone been up to in the week? Anything exciting going on, or anything car related, non-car related? You tell me, chaps, what's been going on?
Go on, Rob, you go first.
Okay. We're gonna do the segment called Rants with Rob, are we?
Yes, Rants with Rob. Yeah, go on. What we've got to rant about this time?
Well, there's a story involved, and then a piece of helpful motoring consumer advice to follow.
We like consumer advice.
So obviously, I live in a very hot part of the world, and obviously your car gets very hot. We've got a shade outside our house, and then even though I park the car under the shade, I put like one of those reflective windscreen things in.
Right.
But the car obviously still gets quite warm in the cabin during the middle of the day. And I went to go somewhere in the evening the other day, probably just beginning of the week. And what had happened is I had this air freshener. You get these air fresheners that are filled with liquid aroma, and you sit them in the vents. And this thing had burst, and I opened the car door and I was like, smells fragrant. And
smells better than usual.
It smells. That air freshener is really working. Anyway, so I pulled the reflective bubble wrap thing out, put it in the back, and I was like setting everything up to go out. And I turned the light on in the car, and I realised what happened is that the air freshener had leaked all of its juice all down the dashboard, and it has had some kind of acidic effect and has taken all the soft touch plastic lining thing off the actual plastic, so it now looks wrinkly and horrible. And it's just I didn't want to touch it. I was hoping it would dry out or whatever and go hard again, and then I was just like, I'm gonna have to bin that off. But the problem is I've left it, and it's actually like crept through, like the panels that it's touched has just ruined them. So it's got the main air vent module, the stereo surround, and now the climate control module has been absolutely ruined by air freshener.
So you're saying that
I'm really annoyed about.
This burst leaked all over your dash and all over everything, and your thought was, I'll just leave it and see if it gets better.
I mean,
the thing is, I didn't want to spread it around because I'd seen the corrosive effect that it had, and I thought I probably don't want to get that on my hands or anything.
But Robert, it's like when you have a rash, right? Like if you suffer with a bit of eczema, don't you? Like, not to get too personal,
thanks for bringing that up.
Well, but it's related, right? When you get eczema, right, and you rub some cream on it, don't you?
Yeah.
Right? You don't just leave it, do you?
I'm not sure cream is probably the most useful thing. I mean, I could have ripped my dashboard apart and driven around in half a car, which is probably what you'd do.
Well, probably
because of convenience.
But instead of having a corrosive substance slathered all over the dash whilst you're driving instead. Yeah, that sounds much better.
It's kind of stopped spreading now. Anyway, the consumer advice is if something does go wrong with your car, don't leave it, even if it is something purely cosmetic. And the other thing is, don't buy fluid-filled air fresheners because they ruin your life.
Right, that is a very useful bit of consumer advice, Rob. Thank you for that. I wasn't anticipating that in this segment of the podcast. I just thought you'd maybe gone to the shops and got some chips or something like that. But I mean, fair play. Well, note to everyone, buy cardboard air fresheners as opposed to fluid ones. I often go for the carport ones. I have to say, like the new car smell, which I quite like.
Which you
but-
have in your 25-year-old Fiat.
Yes, I do. And do you know what? It tricks everyone. They always jump in and go, "Oh, brand new! I'm in the brand new Porsche 911."
They're like, this car smells of finance.
Yeah, exactly. You know when people say you can't put a price on something, you can put a price on finance. It costs £1.50 from a petrol station. It's very convenient. What about you, Mike? Have you got any bits of consumer ranting advice, or not really this week?
No consumer ranting advice. All I've really been up to was did a fair bit of work on the Beamer last week.
Yes.
It was more fault finding. So, of all the things that I told everyone about last time we spoke, all the things that were wrong, I then found out how they're wrong and how much money I need to spend to fix them.
Right.
So, I did actually fix the headlight though. That was all right. So, first of all, basically the sort of headlight and the indicator, they're separate but the same piece. They're sort of connected by like a little tiny tab of plastic.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm guessing previously when someone else was taking the headlight out, they just snapped it. So it just kind of held in, and then I was driving around one day and the indicator just fell out and was banging around on my car. So I had to fix that, and I sort of bodged it for a while and used like some silicone and had it stuck in. It wasn't really a long-term fix. So made a new bracket for it, and now it's all bolted together. Probably, I would say, stronger than how it was originally.
Right.
It's not exactly weight saving, it being held together with steel bolts, but it's not a race car, so I think we'll be all right.
I think you'll be fine. I mean, it's better than OEM, right? If it's stronger.
Exactly what I said. OEM plus.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
In every way.
Exactly.
I don't know why BMW didn't do this in the first place. It just did so much better.
Yeah, they were
And
too
then,
busy.
the aircon found out that the compressor's gone, so need to buy a new compressor and fit that at some point. So just some bits and pieces. Standard maintenance.
Any idea how much all of this work is going to cost you to get these faults rectified?
Well, there's also the ignition switch and that kind of thing, which I didn't.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think it's just a case of buying a new ignition, which is an amount of money. A brand new air conditioning compressor is like 150 quid or something,
right?
Or a second-hand one is 40 quid, which is very, very tempting.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking about going second-hand just to make it work.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, because then it should be that probably. I can't imagine what else it would be, because you said you got it recharged, didn't you? The aircon, and it didn't seem to work.
Didn't recharge it, just tested the pressure. That's why I know it's the compressor.
Right.
So there's no point. There's no point in recharging it if it's just going to piss straight back out the other side.
Right. Well, interestingly, on the subject of air conditioning, and this actually relates to my bit of news this week, I bought a car that has air conditioning, and it's the second car I've ever owned with aircon. And I was reveling in it, actually. It was quite a muggy 20 odd degrees last weekend. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to put the aircon on because I can. And I did. And yes, it's the car itself, as I think we alluded to in the last podcast that we did together, is a Saab 9.3 Estate, which is a lovely car, a jet fighter for the road, according to Top Gear.
You've been holding that one back. You couldn't help yourself.
I couldn't. I mean, honestly, it is. I am going to do a review of the car, so I don't want to necessarily talk too much about the features and bore everyone to death. But it's got some great features in it, right?
Just to talk on the subject of being bored to death for the listeners, we've been told this thing is a jet fighter for the road at least 3 times a day for the last 3.5 weeks.
Well, it is a jet fighter for the road.
It's not, though.
Just because it's got a night panel button doesn't make it a jet fighter.
The night panel button. Panel button, honestly, that whoever came up with that, genius, right? And I don't know why more car manufacturers don't do it. Because, right, I mean, I don't know whether it's patented or what, I don't know, it probably isn't.
Turning your lights off is not patented.
Well, yeah, but it's different though, because, and interestingly, so as I mentioned, it dims all the lights, but I thought it left the whole speedo. But what it does is actually it only shows the first bit of the speedo up to about 90 or 100 miles an hour, I think. So it doesn't give you the full speedo, but it gives you most of it, like 2/3 of it.
Why would you pay for a feature that reduces your ability to gauge one of the critical aspects, one of the critical parameters of your driving.
Yeah, but you shouldn't be driving fast at night anyway. So
any Germans who buy the car and are driving on the autobahn don't know how fast they're going.
So hang on, what you're saying is jet fighters don't go fast at night. I don't think that's true.
I'm not saying that, but because it's a jet fighter for the road, you can't go too fast on the road at night. It's dangerous.
Do you know what this
jet
all
fighters,
smells of?
What?
Horse shit.
Yeah. No, well, honestly, chaps, besides the night panel button, which is amazing, it's got some great touches like the cup holder. Have you ever seen a Saab cup holder before?
I have, because you've shown it to me about 100 times.
Honestly, that is the best thing ever. But I will tell you one thing, which I don't know whether this is a standard feature on a lot of cars, but it has a thing. So the glove box on it is absolutely huge, which is quite a pleasant surprise, because a lot of cars nowadays, you think, oh, that's a big glove box, and you open it, you think that's tiny. I can only fit, I don't know, a pen in there,
or a pair of gloves,
or a pair of gloves, right? but crucially, Saab have fitted like an air conditioning, a vent that comes off the air conditioning, right, which you can adjust to open it up. And if you do, and you run the air conditioning on, you can keep your sandwiches and drinks cool in the glove box.
Is that true? Is it?
Yeah, my Golf's got that as well.
That is actually quite good.
That is very good, isn't it?
It is.
Apparently it's I don't know whether it's an original Saab idea, but apparently not a lot of cars have it. I mean, it might be a common thing now, but this is a 2008 car, and apparently Saab have been doing it for quite some time. So yeah, I don't know, but I mean, okay, I don't want to talk too much about
one of the work cars I had actually had a fridge in the center console, like an actual refrigerated area.
What, in the dash?
In the center console, and so behind the gear selector, and you'd lift up the thing, and it was like a proper chilled. It wasn't like an air vent from the AC. It was just a chilled box that you could turn on and off. Except the fuse had blown on it, and the yard refused to replace it, so it was just a hot box.
Right, a hot box. So it was just not great. I mean, I have to say, my final points on the Saab, because like I say, I will do a review on it, but I just love some of the quirkiness. I mean, the keys go below the gearbox, the gear stick. So it's in the middle, and it's all very nice. I'm not going to pretend that it's the best vehicle in the world, but
I think what I have heard, Sash, about that, the key placement. Apparently, Saabs have quite an issue of people snapping the keys.
Yeah, so admittedly, they did change the design slightly, because in older Saabs, for a safety feature, because Saab and Swedish car manufacturers like Volvo, they're big into their safety, and one of the old safety features was to get the key out of the ignition, you'd actually have to lock the car in reverse. So you put the car in reverse, turn the engine off with the key, and that would then allow you to take the key out of the ignition, except the fact that loads of people forgot that you had to do that and tried to take the key out of the ignition when the car wasn't in reverse. And as a result of that, they either snapped the key or broke the ignition. Now, that's annoying. So Saab were like, we won't do that anymore, and we'll just leave it in. You can lock it in any gear you want, neutral, first, reverse, whatever you fancy, and it will just come out. But on older Saabs, I think particularly the older 9.5s, that used to be a feature. I'm not going to lie, it has got its issues, though, because I used to carry a big bunch of keys, which I don't necessarily need. And if you do have a big bunch of keys on your car key, it will end up scratching the center console bit underneath the key. So it's got its plus points, but it's not. I mean, it would make more sense to just have it on the side of the car. But that's boring, So Saab like to do things differently, and that's what I like.
It's inconvenient, so Sash loves it.
I'm a man of convenience, mate. As we know. So so that's been my story. Great car. Like I say, I will do a review on it, and I managed over 55 miles to the gallon on the drive back, which I thought was very impressive. Now I understand why people own diesel cars, because they are quite fuel efficient. Which I got all that comfort, and it gave me better economy than my old car, which I was all for. Enough about Saab for now, because I've bored everyone, and probably, you guys already know about Saabs. Or my Saab, anyway. So today's podcast, we've got a few topics to talk about, and I thought that we'd kick things off with a point that you actually raised, Mike, which was around the fact of, well, basically cars that should exist but don't exist. Now, I don't fully understand where you're coming from on this, so can you elaborate on that?
Very broad subject. So there wasn't anything in specifically that I was really going for. It was just, when you're thinking, yeah, that'd be or you just assume that a car company makes a car. For example, on the later BMW M5s, they all only came in automatic, whereas they previously all only came in manual. You can't even get the option on some of the. Is it all of the new ones, or is it just there was that certain bracket where you could only get automatics? You just sort of think, well, you just assume that they would make it. It sort of should exist, but it doesn't.
Rob, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a good. So are you talking about specific models that are in production that could be improved by having different options? Are you talking about cars that possibly were made as like a concept that never went into production?
Both, to be honest. Yeah, there's a few concepts out there that you just think that definitely would have sold, but then they didn't make it for whatever reason, financials or
well, on the subject,
marketing.
Well, on the subject of BMW, interestingly, and I think this is where I was coming from as well, is the fact that BMW just released the fact that they're going to do an M3 estate, which obviously was never a thing, even though they did do pre-production ones, and I think you sent some pictures and links on it a little while back. Because that's always astonished me as well, because, well, sticking with BMW, it's like the new M5 as well, for example. They used to do an estate, well, they did an estate for a bit on some models, but the newer ones, you can't get an estate anymore, which I think is a shame, actually, because I think estate cars are more trendy now than they ever have been.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from their point of view, and this is kind of what I was saying with the marketing and that, everyone's going for the SUV and crossovers. Nobody wants, or they don't think they can sell an estate car, which looking at the numbers, they probably can't. Like, it's only going to be a few individuals who will actually want the estate version of an M5.
Yeah, true.
And that's the reason why they're seen as sort of cool, or, they're quite rare because people didn't really buy them.
No, that's
which makes them more desirable these days.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, to be fair. I'm still just surprised because I think when we went to Caffeine and Machine, Mike, I think there was a guy who had replicated an M3 estate.
There was, yeah.
And I remember, and he went to huge lengths for this because I think he bought the sportiest model he could and then just put all the M3 trinkets on it. And I think he even put the M3 engine. So he spent a lot of money just to have an estate M3. By the looks, I can only guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of money, but the sort of, and this is why people didn't really understand why they didn't do it in the first place, because the whole purpose of the concept was to prove that they could do it without needing a new production line for it. They could just take the normal various body panels and other bits and pieces for an estate 3 Series and then chuck on the M3 parts and it would work. They did it, proved that it would work, and then scrap the idea for whatever reason. But that's why, you can, and you do see them, like what we saw at Caffeine and Machine, you do see them semi-rarely where people have done exactly that, because you can, if you have the will and the money, go out and buy an M3 and an estate 3 Series and put them together. I'm sure it's a bit more complicated than that, but on the face of it, you can do it.
Fundamentally, yes, that's exactly what you need to do. I mean, here's a question though, chaps. Well, 2 questions. Specifically, would you buy a estate M3? Yes or no? And secondly, are you guys fans of estates in the first place?
Big fan of estates.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of estates. I would definitely have an estate over an SUV in the UK, for example. I don't know what Mike's thought is on that when you're saying about the SUV market. And would I buy an M3 estate? Don't know.
I agree with Rob on that. I don't know. It sort of seems, I know the RS6 and the RS4, the estate versions of those are sort of the ones to have. They're the more popular ones. But I think that's more of an outlier than anything. I don't know if I'd want the M3 estate.
You can get an M5 estate, can't you?
Not anymore.
No,
Not anymore.
They
You
did it for a
used to
couple of
be able.
generations.
Well, interestingly, the E39 M5, which is the last with the manual gearbox, they never made an estate one of that, as far as I'm aware. But the predecessor to that, I've forgotten the code name. They
E34.
did E34, and then the one after the E39, the E61, I think V10 M5, they made an estate of that, and then the one after that, they just stopped doing it. So I don't know why. It must be. It must just be. It must be down to sale figures. It might just be like nobody has bought the last generation of M5 or M3 estate or whatever. So we're just not going to bother doing it, which I kind of get. I mean, I have to say, I never used to be a fan of estate cars, right? Generally speaking, I'd probably go for a saloon over an estate, but the Saab I just picked up last week, actually, funnily enough, is an estate. And it's one of those cars that I actually prefer the way the estate looks over the saloon at which it's based on. And I don't always think that's the case, to be honest with you. But there are some out there that I think, I'd rather the estate than the saloon.
I agree. I think that's why I prefer the saloon M3, or rather coupe M3, over the estate. Whereas in the Audi's case, I think the estates look better.
Yes, I agree. And I think so much so that Audi only make the RS6 in estate now. I don't think they actually make the saloon one anymore. I could be wrong in saying that, but I don't think they do. They used to. And I think the idea of a fast estate car just took off so well for Audi that they were like, well, there's no point making the saloon one anymore.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to sort of the use of the car as well. The M3 is, a track car for the road, whereas the RS6 was seen as being an off-road sort of rally pedigree car for the road.
Yeah.
So when you're using something like that, it's always marketed as, people always stick roof racks and take their kayaks and mountain bikes, and you can do anything in it, that kind of stuff. But you've still got this massive powertrain underneath. So that makes more sense to have the estate car. Whereas on the M3, doesn't really make that much sense to chuck an estate car around a track when you have the option of chucking a coupe around instead.
I mean, that's true. That is true. And as well as that, you've actually brought up a good point. With Audis, which I've sort of forgot about, all Audis, fast Audis, they're all four-wheel drive.
Yeah.
So really, a fast Audi estate is actually a very credible rival to something like an SUV or crossover, because they're all four-wheel drive, because that's what they're meant to be. But obviously a BMW, it's rear-wheel drive. So what is the actual point?
They're not just rear-wheel drive anymore. The new ones, the new M cars aren't.
I know with the M5, yeah, you're right. I know with the M5, it's standard four-wheel drive, but you can turn it off.
Yeah, that's the thing. You can turn it off, but I'm not entirely sure if that's a fully off.
I think it is.
Is it a fully off on the M cars?
It is a fully off, but I don't know whether... I only thought that was on the M5 at the moment and the M8, but I didn't know whether that was a thing on the M3 or other M cars. It's definitely not on the M2. M2 is just rear-wheel drive. That's it, which is a very back to basics. And I think the M140 or the M135 now is... Oh, actually, that might... No, I don't know, actually. That's a good question. But I know with some BMWs now, they, like you said, if they are four-wheel drive, because I think, well, that's what the market wants at the end of the day. People want four-wheel drive, and people don't want to be always skidding around in the car parks, which obviously old BMWs do. So yeah, that is an interesting point. I think, I don't know. I don't think I would be convinced of having an M3 estate. But interestingly, I think I'm trying to think of another example of a car that should exist, but doesn't for some reason. I mean, I'll tell you one that shouldn't exist, because I saw a prototype picture. So you remember the Alfa Romeo 166 I had?
Mm-hmm.
They made a prototype estate version, and that was the ugliest thing I think I've ever seen in my entire life.
Because that 166 wasn't good looking in the first place in my eyes.
It was a very Marmite shape, particularly the pre-facelift one. The one that I had. So yeah, I don't know whether you would. I wouldn't look it up, to be honest, mate. You might be sick.
Yeah.
What
is that?
Yeah, don't do it. I don't know if Rob's looking it up as well.
I'm gonna have a look now. Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't recommend that. Do you think?
I think we're talking about estates and cars that should exist, or I think should exist that don't. And I think I mentioned this before when we were chatting about it in the week. The Alfa Romeo, not the Alfa Romeo. No, it's definitely not Alfa Romeo. Aston Martin Lagonda estate. Oh my goodness, that is
Ah,
disgusting, Sash. Sorry,
it's a
that
good
is
reason why it
horrendous.
didn't make it to production. Yeah, it's terrible. I admit that was terrible, and that's why it never made it to production. But sorry, you were saying the Aston Martin Lagonda
Yeah, I think that's
fast brake, whatever they called
shooting
it.
brake. That was it.
Shooting
Aston
Shooting
brake.
Martin.
brake.
Yeah. Let me find a picture of that, and obviously, then for the listeners,
If you
to look it up.
Google,
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, they called it Aston Martin Lagonda Taraf, and that was the saloon version. And then they're shooting. I think it was shooting brake is what they called it. Obviously, they
Yeah.
made the old. This is the new one I'm thinking of. The old one that did come also as an estate, I think, as well.
they did.
It looks like a Volvo.
Yeah,
It does like, yeah, it's
it's.
very fast Volvo. It's a Volvo
I have
V12.
I have to say the original Aston Martin Lagonda was probably the most controversial shape I think that's ever actually been put into production for a car. I think that's a bold statement, but can you think of a car that has ever looked more striking than the original Lagonda? I'm not saying
GT
it's good
Cruiser.
looking. No, I still think the Lagonda. I mean, think about the time that Lagonda came out as well. That was the 70s. When that shape came out, people were like, "What the hell is that?" But admittedly, they were actually quite terrible cars. And
I put it in I put it in our little group chat on Facebook, guys, so you can have a look at what I'm thinking with this Aston.
but so, do you think it should have been in production then?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I think to be fair, the Aston Martin Lagonda Taraf, whatever the new one, I think they only made like a few hundred of them.
Yeah, they did. It was very
Very limited
yeah,
run.
it was. That does look very Volvo-ish, right, Mike? You're right.
Yeah, even the new ones look Volvo-y. Well, newer ones.
Yeah, but also, and I don't want to sound harsh here, it does look a little bit like a hearse.
It
Yeah,
does, yeah.
it
You're not
does
wrong.
Right?
I was rather hoping you wouldn't say that, but
It does look a little bit like a hearse. I mean, I don't know. I mean, yeah, but who would really buy an Aston Martin estate though?
that is a good point as well. I mean,
Yeah.
That's the thing.
the Rapide is like if they did a estate version of the Rapide, do you think anyone would buy it?
No, because not many people bought the Rapide in the first place, mate. It was the sales flop, the Rapide, which is a shame because I was actually listening to a podcast, another motoring podcast the other day, and they were talking about Aston Martin as a brand, and they're actually really struggling at the moment. I mean, Aston Martin as a brand they've never really been that successful. You know, if you look at the likes of Ferrari, Lamborghini, and that's because they've never really been properly owned outright. And the cars they've done are nice, but not many people buy them because they're not quite as good as the alternatives. So, you
Yeah.
know, I think Clarkson mentioned this, and other reviewers have mentioned this on when they review them. Everyone loves an Aston, particularly in the UK. Like, if you see somebody drive past with an Aston, you don't automatically think you're a bell end. If you see somebody drive past in a Ferrari, on the other hand, you think they're a cock. Even though I'd have a Ferrari over an Aston, I look at somebody who's a Ferrari and you think you're just a rich twat. You look at somebody in an Aston, on the other hand, you think that's quite classy. And
Yeah.
I don't think anyone really hates Aston Martin. I
Well, you
think
know,
people,
Aston Martin are now like part owned by Mercedes.
yeah, well, they share engines with them, don't they?
Yeah, and I think and the guy who's now I think CEO of Aston Martin was the CEO of the AMG division of Mercedes.
That wouldn't surprise me.
And in terms of ownership, they're now owned by a business conglomerate headed by Lawrence Stroll, who is obviously
Yes.
Lance Stroll's father, who is an F1 driver, and that's why Racing Point are going to be Aston Martin Racing next year.
Mm-hmm.
And that they're obviously that's the majority shareholder, but obviously there's a minority share controlled by Mercedes, and the other shareholder is Toto Wolff, who's the team principal for Mercedes AMG Formula One team.
Yeah.
So there is big changes going on at Aston Martin, whether of course those are public or not. What's released in the media would lead everyone to kind of assume that things are going to be moving in a different direction at Aston Martin going forward. So that'd be interesting to see what happens, you know?
It would be interesting to see what happens, but I don't know, because Aston Martin, I mean, they've been owned by Ford, and now they've changed hands quite a few times, and they've always made very pretty cars, in my opinion. Like Aston Martin, I think they do have a good looking range, but yeah, for some reason they've just never worked fully as a brand. I don't think so, in the sense of they just never really sold that many vehicles. They don't really have much clientele in that respect, but what they did, which was a mistake, and I read about this earlier in the year, is that last December, when COVID and stuff didn't even exist, or just before it did, Aston Martin were doing a really interesting deal on their V8 Vantage, the new one. And it was something stupid along the lines of, and don't quote me on this, you literally put £1,000 deposit down and you pay £1,000 a month for a V8 Vantage.
I did hear about this, yeah.
And which is an astonishing deal, right? Considering what else you could get for that money. You couldn't get anything near as good as that. They did that for a limited time because I think they needed to get rid of some old stock, and they got rid of it. And everyone then heard about it. Then they put their prices back up to what they usually are. And since that point in time, nobody is prepared to pay the actual original list price or the original finance deal, because they know that there's some people out there who've got this amazing £1,000 a month deal, right? They shouldn't have done that. They really shot themselves in the foot with that. And now people are going,
hang on a minute. If you go to Tesco this week and it's half price on hobnobs, and you tell all your mates that it's half price on hobnobs, when they get there, they're back up at full price. Your mates don't go, "Oh, well, I'm not going to buy hobnobs this week," do they?
I do.
Go, "Oh, now it's back at full price."
Yeah,
but like, why are people now refusing to buy not hobnobs? Why are people refusing to buy Aston Martins at list price? Because
why are people refusing to buy hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of hobnobs?
You missed the boat, mate. It's not on the car manufacturer.
No, but Rob, I think the point is, it's because, and this is my view on it, but the way I look at it is the standard list price for a V8 Vantage, you can get a lot more car elsewhere and better cars. And I think that's what people like. Aston Martin, I think, needed to provide some sort of incentive to say, this isn't quite as good as a 911 or whatever, and blah blah blah, for the same price, so we'll give you this money off, right? I mean, obviously didn't say that, but I think this was the mentality, and people were turning around to go, well, I'm just going to get I don't know, like a 911 turbo or something else, right? I'm not saying I wouldn't get one myself.
If you're in the market for something like that, then your money is probably less of an object than it would be to somebody like us. The point is, what Aston Martin did is to try and shift stock. Is they moved it down into a bracket that people who aren't necessarily in the market for that type of car are, they've moved it into a different bracket so that they can shift stock. And now people are like, oh yeah, well, now I'm not going to buy one because it's unaffordable again. Well, duh.
Yeah, I know. It's just. I don't know. It's an odd one. Like I say, I'm no businessman. I'm sure there's proper, like you say, good reasoning behind it. It's just, I think it's a bit of a shame that in some respects, I just think that they kind of did shoot themselves in the foot a little bit. But I'm not sure. Who knows? I actually really like, the reason why I like Aston Martin as well is because they are one of the only car manufacturers, and this sort of relates back to your first point on this topic, Mike, that actually make big engined cars with manual gearboxes still. And I like that, because you could get it in the old one, and I still think you can with the new one. You can get
7-speed, is it?
7-speed manual, and you can get a V12 Vantage.
Ooh.
How cool is that?
A 7-speed manual. You are going to be changing gear a lot.
Yeah, rowing through the gears.
Yeah, but Porsche do it as well on the new 911. You can get a 7-speed manual. Yeah,
because Corvettes did that for a while as well, didn't they?
They did, yes.
Corvette.
But you just sort of think, what's the point? If you're going to have 7 gears and it's going to be in a performance vehicle, well, yeah, you might as well have 8. In which case, you might as well have a computer do it for you.
Yeah, I don't know.
There is a limit to how much you can, especially in a performance vehicle where you're driving it specifically for it to be at its limit.
I think there's a different mentality going on, certainly in my mind, and probably in Sash's as well. Because I remember when I was first learning to drive, or I actually remember being a kid, and when 6-speed gears became commonplace on most cars. Like I think the first one I saw with a 6-speed gear was like a Volkswagen Touran, and I was like, oh, 6-speed, and I was like, that's one more than 5. I need one more than 5. And what goes through my mind is like, yeah, but having a 7-speed manual is great. I want one because I have one more.
Exactly.
It's like, that's exactly what's going through Sash's mind. Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
could have a 7-speed manual. A
I
7-speed
mean,
manual's great.
Yeah,
I have to
fair
say,
enough.
going back to, I mean, the Saab I bought last week is the first car I've ever owned that's got 6 gears, right? And I was just like, oh, it takes a bit of time to get used to. I've never driven a car with 7-speed manual gearbox.
Do you know what I drove last week?
What's that?
A 4-speed manual. That was a
Oh
pass. That was
no! What were you
those are
driving?
terrible.
It was a T25 VW camper van from 1987.
No way.
Yeah.
That is
So the gears were more of like a suggestion. It was just like
Right.
throwing it around in the gearbox, trying to get it in. Yeah, four gears. Like you get up to about 50 miles an hour in fourth. And you're just like, I don't really want to go much faster. It's not.
Well,
It's not
I
great.
mean, I have to say, I think a lot of people were astonished when my first car, my Fiat Cinquecento, actually has 5 gears. A lot of people were like, "Oh, I would expect this to be a 4-speed." I'm not gonna lie, looking at it, it doesn't look like it deserves 5. And I was like,
Doesn't deserve that. You don't get a 5th gear.
And I
when
was
you
like,
drive that car, you're never really sure what gear you're going to select when you go for a
No,
gear change.
it's like stirring coal, that gearbox. It's very loose. It's very wobbly. And yes, well, interestingly, I think this links quite nicely to our next point, relating a little bit to older cars. We were sort of talking about this the other day about we're obviously, into cars, and we've owned our fair share of secondhand cars and so on and so forth, and we've done repairs on them. My question is, what's been like the biggest sort of repair that you guys have done on vehicles, and maybe what is a repair that you would like to do as like a sort of checklist exercise, a tick in the box sort of thing, if that makes sense? Because obviously with an older car, you're going to have to repair it. It's just fact.
It's the biggest jobs we've done to our own cars.
Yeah, I would say your own, but we can talk about other people's cars as well. Like, that's not,
Biggest car thing I've done to. Oh. Well, me and you swapped the engine on the Cinquecento, didn't we?
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably say that's been probably my biggest job.
However,
that we did.
That probably wasn't the most difficult job I've done on a car because that engine basically fell out.
Yeah, true. I mean, to be fair though, mate, I mean, because
swapping a cam belt was pretty difficult.
Yeah, not easy.
And that's probably the limit of my mechanical history there on doing jobs on my own cars. I swapped the cam belt over on Fiat Punto and the Vectra in the same day, and I was just like, nah, this is. And then when you said the other day that you got it done on the Saab, which is I think it's probably based on the same engine as the Vectra had back then. Yeah, when you said how much it cost, I was like, I wish I'd have just paid for it now. It was not worth the effort, because I obviously had to go out and buy all the different parts, and I say all the different parts, you just buy it in a kit with a water pump and that.
Yeah.
And then fit it. And it wasn't hugely difficult, but I did it without getting the engine out, which in the Fiat Punto, it's fine. It's massive.
Yeah, loads of space.
Tiny engine, do what you want. But yeah, those large diesel engines, especially in the Vectra, wasn't much space to get your hands down, and one sort of wrong slip and your timing was out. So you had to do it. And I know you can get the sort of locking tools that you put in.
Yeah.
But I obviously do not have one of them.
You just get a type of Tipex.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah, you set top dead center by putting the wrench on the crankshaft until you get because there's marks on the engine on the cells, by the way,
listeners. Did all this. That's...
Yeah, I mean, besides the point that whether whether we know how to do it or not. I mean, I've never done one on my own car cam belt. I've helped my brother do it, do a cam belt change on his Mark II Golf. But yeah, it's interesting. But like you say, I mean, when it gets to sort of modern stuff like that, I say modern, it's 12 years old, but like those sort of tightly compact diesel engines, I personally, not with the facilities that I've currently got, would tackle it myself, to be honest. I'd rather just pay, like I said, it cost me 290 quid, which is a pretty reasonable price, I thought, for a cam belt and water pump. And
you guys, when you work on cars, and especially cam belt is going to be probably the most pertinent example of this. When you work on a car, is your heart always in your mouth when you're going to turn it on again?
Oh yeah.
Even though I hand cranked the engine before I turned the engine on, so I knew that nothing was going to happen because I'd already cranked it around, nothing was hitting. So I was like, right, it's fine. Second you put that key in, your heart's like jumping up in your throat.
Yeah.
Is it going to bust? Is it going to bust on this?
Do you know what? I have to
900-pound
say,
Vectra.
on both occasions. So, Rob, you mentioned earlier, we changed the engine on my Cinquecento, right? And last year I did on that engine, I did a full engine rebuild. I say full engine, but a pretty comprehensive rebuild. Changed the valve stem, oil seals, and head gasket, and you name it, everything like that. And that was quite an involved and tricky job. Well, I say tricky, it was quite time consuming, but it was involved. But on both occasions, obviously, I've dismantled the engine, you put it back together. And my question is more, and I remember when we put the engine back in on the new one, is whether it will start first time or not, right?
Yeah.
Not whether I made a mistake that will result in ultimate failure of the engine. I had confidence that the engine was going to be fine. It was just more whether it would start or not. That's the big thing. And it did when we did it, except I forgot to plug the alternator back in. So after 20 minutes, the battery had gone. And it was completely drained.
It was kind of steadily dying, and we were like, "Oh no, what have we done?" And we're like, "Whoa!" And we were like, "Uh-oh!" Like me, you, and your brother kind of looked at each other and went, "Something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong," and it just died. And then we were like, okay. Sash, look through your photos and let's have a look at what you didn't plug back in again.
Yeah, and it was just one lead that I just hadn't connected to the alternator.
Didn't your brother just be like, wasn't your brother just like, Sash, do you think this lead that's kind of dangling shouldn't be kind of attached to something?
I don't think my brother was there, I think that was you. I think it was you.
Okay.
I think you noticed it. Because I remember it was a really cold January day that we put the engine back. That was the day that my Alpha had a fit about the alarm.
Yeah.
And wouldn't want to start, or it wouldn't want to unlock.
I had to take your mum to the shops. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, you did. So anyway, that's a side thing. But yeah, it's exactly. And even on the second occasion when I rebuilt the engine, just starting it back up, it was just I just couldn't believe it when it started back up, and I was amazed. So it's a very satisfying thing. Mike, I would recommend whenever you get an opportunity to swap an engine in a car, whether it be putting the original back in or putting a different one, I would quite like to give a go of like putting a non-standard engine, like an upgraded engine, into a car that.
Mike, next time your engine needs an oil change, just swap the engine.
Just take it out, put a new one in. But that is next on my list. And I think the sort of easy way to go into that non-standard car is just buying the engine up from the one you have. So a good example is, buying a 325 and then putting a 330 engine in it or something along those lines. Because all the internals are going to work together. They're already built to do that. And then, the next level up from that is buying an engine which is completely inappropriate for the car that it's going in.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I think the problem when you get to that stage, though, is you then get involved with cutting stuff away and fabricating bits of designs and brackets and metal and stuff like that. Because if it's an engine that just wasn't meant to be in that car in the first place, and it's a lot bigger, chances are it probably won't fit. For
sure, not even the size though. I don't think the brackets and that is too much of an issue. It's just a time thing and an effort thing. My issue with that would be the electronics. On any modern car, if you're putting a modern engine into it that shouldn't be there, it's going to be a nightmare to work with.
That's interesting. So what? Yeah, I see exactly where you're coming from. I mean, on the whole, for me, I like doing more mechanical things as opposed to electrical bodywork related things. But my next job that I would like to do, not necessarily a specific job, but an area, is I would like to do more bodywork stuff on cars. Bodywork is a bit of a nightmare, and I have got some experience of it now because I had to grind back a load of rust on the Cinquecento last year, and I got a mate of mine to help me with the welding. And I would like to know how to kind of properly weld, or at least have a good go at it, because I did a little bit, but I would need more time, and it would be nice to just have that skill of fabricating and putting, restore. Because let's face it, I mean, for me anyway, the cars that I kind of like, they're all old and Italian, which therefore means that they suffer with rust. And I feel like you can save more money if you can do that job well yourself. Your quid's in.
I think this might be an issue that we may have to solve and learn how to do if we're going to get a cheap track car?
Well, actually, this links quite nicely to the next topic, which you've mentioned actually, which is track cars. We can still talk about repairs as well. You brought up a very good article the other day about, I think it was from an old Evo magazine or article about 3 years ago. So what's the sort of best entry level track car? So before we go into specific cars, chaps, I want to know from you, what will you think is the requirement for a good track car? List me some points and parameters, because I've got a few in my head, but I'll be interested to know what your thoughts are on it.
For an entry level one, cheap,
Yeah.
really, really cheap.
Okay,
Well, that's
cheap.
definitely a Mike answer.
Well, he's part Scottish, isn't he? So.
What's the requirement for anything at all? Cheap.
Cheap as chips. No, but
what is the best chocolate bar? Freddo, 15p.
Which is because I don't. It was in some of the articles we were reading. I know they were quite old, so the prices are a bit different. But you can't put top of the list Mazda MX-5. Fine, that's the go-to, cheap, reliable, all the rest of it. And then 2 cars down, an E46 M3. They're completely different price brackets. That is different ends of the spectrum. I know it's not a supercar, but it's you're looking at 15 grand these days.
Yeah.
If you're going to get into track racing, you probably are not very experienced at racing. That's the first thing I'd look at. So on that basis, what you need is something that you don't really care about when you bin it, because you will bin it. You'll end up in the kitty litter and then you'll be upset.
Cheap, top of your list as well. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, okay, fine. Yeah. You don't care about it. So if you're going to, you probably don't want to put too much money in it. But then you think about things that are going to help you learn to be a better track driver. So you probably want something that's got quite a stiff chassis. You don't want very much weight, because weight compromises all kinds of racing things, that in parameters that are important for racing, like your acceleration and deceleration. Let's just call it acceleration and deceleration. So you're going to have to, the more weight you have, the better brakes you need, the better suspension you need, the better engine you need, all this kind of stuff. So you need it to be able to be stripped out and get it light as possible. So yeah, stiff chassis, keep it as light as possible. If you're going to run stock suspension, you need decent suspension when you go in, and you need to look at, basically what you need to look at is everything that deals with your handling and your deceleration and your acceleration performance, because that is what is going to help you on track. Don't even look at the engine to start, because what you need to be able to do is you need to be able to build up confidence to be able to get your cornering right, get your lines right, be able to actually, it's all about the cornering. So everything you should start with is to do with cornering. Now, you're not going to run downforce, because no one's got, if you're a hobbyist, you're not running £1 million aerodynamics budget. So don't even start.
Don't put a diffuser on it. Is that what you're saying?
Not at the beginning, absolutely not.
When you're not going anywhere near quick enough to get anything from it, you're sticking a massive wing on the back of it.
So when we did racing, the racing team at university, everyone was like, only when you have done absolutely everything and you are still losing traction in a corner, that is when you start to look at aero. When you're at the absolute limit of your tires, that is when you start to look at aero. And you need to get the most out of, if you're going to go racing, you can put some really sticky rubber on. I mean, that is also a big sticking plaster in racing, is just go for a softer compound. And suddenly, I can now take this corner at 10 miles an hour faster. But I haven't done anything else to my car, so I can stick to the road better, but my suspension is going to fail, because now the limiting factor is your suspension.
You know what I think people neglect as well when it comes to track days and vehicles and stuff like that, is brakes. I think brakes
absolutely
are super important. And it's not always the one that you think most obvious of. But, if you're pounding a car around the track, and you're running sort of standard brakes, obviously depending on the car, they're going to cook, they're going to get worn, they're going to fade
immediately.
So I think brakes.
A few laps and you're gone.
The thing is, that gives you a hell of a lot more confidence, your brakes, knowing that you can brake really, really late, knowing that you can be brave and stop is a really big confidence booster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is the age-old thing. Don't go fast if you can't stop fast.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. I mean, so on that sort of topic, so we've talked about some of the parameters that you would require. My question is, before we go on to specific cars, what, in terms of powertrain, what are we thinking? Because I don't necessarily think, and you guys might think I'm wrong here, I don't think it necessarily has to be a rear-wheel drive car. I mean, I think rear-wheel drive will be more fun, but I think you can still gain a lot of valuable track experience and lessons with a good front-wheel drive car, because you can get some very nice front-wheel drive car setup. And something that springs to mind immediately as a potentially good, relatively cheap track day car is something like one of those hot Renault Clios, like the 172s, 182s. You can pick them up for a couple of K or so. And a lot of people do track them, and they strip out the interior, they put a roll cage in, and they're good fun to drive, and they've got good power. They're got good
cheap,
power.
A
couple of K,
Yeah, the thing is, you are going to end up in a world of understeer in a front-wheel drive car. The moment you get brave and you start to know what you're doing and you really want to push the car is going to go, now you see that tree over there? We're going to go climb it.
Yeah, but on the flip side, if you're driving a rear-wheel drive car, you're going to enter into a whole world of pain with oversteer.
Yeah,
The second that the clouds even look slightly greyer than usual, your back end's gone.
That is true. That is true. And understeer is easier to control than oversteer.
Yeah.
So what you're saying here is buy an all-wheel drive car with your.
Well, I did, didn't I?
That's cheating. I mean, I've just realised that each one of us owns a different sort of powertrain. So obviously, you've got four-wheel drive, Rob. Mike's got rear-wheel drive, and I've got front-wheel drive. So I'm not saying I would. I think rear-wheel drive will be more fun, and definitely rear-wheel drive usually is. However, I think, like Mike said, you've got to be careful about, depending on what sort of level you're going in. I mean, for instance, right? You remember a few years ago, I don't know if you must have seen that Top Gear episode where they go and do rallycross, which is kind of like a combination between track and like a little bit of like rally gravel stuff. And basically they turned up with 3 different cars, each of the presenters, I think May had an old Toyota MR2 with a T-bar roof, which I don't think is a bad car because that's mid-engine. So I think you can learn a lot from that. Clarkson went and had an old BMW 328i, which again, rear-wheel drive. You can learn a lot from that. I don't think that was a bad choice. And then I think Hammond had like an old Citroen Saxo VTR, which are quite rare and desirable actually now. They've gone up in value, and that's a front-wheel drive little hot hatchback. So they went for completely different cars from different types of cars, if you like, is that's what I'm trying to allude to.
I think it depends on really what you want to get out of your tracking experience. If you just want to go and thrash something around a track and have a bit of fun, you're probably right in what you're saying about front wheel drive, because when you do start to get understeer, you just back the throttle off and let it grip again, and then you've solved your problem. Although something you will be, depending on if you do strip the weight out of it, you need to be careful again if you've upgraded the brakes, to be careful not to get lift off oversteer in a front wheel drive car, which is really, I mean, you are pushing hard when you get lift off oversteer, but
taking that Clio to its absolute limit at that point.
That's less controllable than having a rear wheel drive car, because if you get oversteer in a rear wheel drive car, if you steer into the corner and back the throttle off until it grips again, you get lift off oversteer. Braking actually increases the problem, because you've obviously got front bias brakes, because obviously the weight transfers forward when you stand on the brakes. So braking harder just lifts the rear wheels off the deck even more and doesn't actually brake them. And so it's like counterintuitive. You get into oversteer and you can't correct it by braking, so you have to kind of lift off the brakes, and then you kind of go faster, and then you completely cock the corner up. Lift off oversteer is lethal.
I mean, I can't say I've ever really experienced that in any of my front-wheel drive cars that I've owned. The Fiat Cinquecento doesn't really
track day that Punto.
Yeah. I mean, I have. Ironically, I have had a lap of the Goodwood race circuit in the Fiat Cinquecento, which Rob had the pleasure of experiencing as well.
And I can tell you added a ton of kit.
Yes. And it wasn't, let's say, it wasn't cornering flat, but
neither were you. You're like, all right, we should probably lift off here. Oh, I should have lifted off 100 meters before that corner.
I was going for it. I did pass quite a few cars actually. But the thing is though, crucially, and I think this also, relates to what you were saying, Rob, as well. A lot of people think, when it comes to tracking a car, that if you stiffen up the suspension, that will make it better, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but people often stiffen up their their shocks and blah blah blah. But really, it's all about grip in a car. Because, like for instance, my Cinquecento, obviously I know it's not a track day car.
Yeah.
It rolls a lot in the corners, but crucially, it has good grip.
Is that not
Yes,
just because
so
of its, its central gravity?
for tracking,
Well,
I mean, tracks are a hell of a lot smoother than the road, right?
yeah.
And so obviously, when basically your suspension travel alters the way that the tire interacts with the road. So if you have a lot of travel, the tire actually, if you think about the tire on the road being perpendicular to the road, that's when it's sitting at equilibrium, let's say, at rest. Yeah. So when the suspension starts to travel, it's no longer at 90 degrees to the road anymore. The top kind of moves around, and that is a function of how much travel you've got. So that actually means your contact patch at the bottom changes and gets smaller. So the reason you stiffen your suspension up to go on track, for example, is to limit the amount that that angle changes. If people have double wishbone suspension, which obviously that changes the thing as well. And there's I mean, I could talk for years about how you do set up suspension and stuff, but
Yes, I mean, maybe we'll reserve that for a special technical podcast.
the reason the Cinquecento is good on the road is because the road is not flat, so it can fall into bumps that if you had hard suspension, the suspension wouldn't react in time, and then you would lose contact with the road entirely. So it's like 4x4s have big, bouncy, soft suspension to go off-road, because obviously things are not smooth and you need the wheel to kind of fall into a hole for it to find something to generate traction from. So there's like it's like suspension is directly proportional to what you want to use it for.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree completely. But so going back, sorry, to so I suppose the original question is, what would be a good entry level beginner's track day car that's not going to be something that's massively expensive, and something that you think you'd learn quite good valuable lessons from, and something crucially, I mean, I would say it's a big criteria, something that parts are readily available for, it's easy to work on. These are all, you're not going to go and buy I don't know, you're not going to buy something new and complicated to do that sort of thing, are you? You want something back to basics. So with that in mind, have you got any suggestions, chaps?
I do, because I've been looking into this for the last few
Go
days.
on, Mike.
So I sent you over that link, actually, didn't I, Sash?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, so I think the Porsche Boxster. So there was one, this was a bit expensive, but there were other ones that have sold previously that were considerably cheaper. So this one was about $3,000, which is on the more expensive side. I mean, realistically speaking, you're not going to pick anything up that's working, that's all right, for less than £1,000 these days.
Yeah.
We're not just looking for an MOT pass, we're looking for something that's going to be all right.
Yeah.
So £1,000. This is on the upper end of the kind of limit on the £3,000 one I seen the other day. I saw some that had sold for like 1,500 quid, 1,600. And I think if you were to buy one of them, that might be an all right go-to.
Yeah.
I would say something low down, kind of convertible type thing for a starting track day, or a kind of a hot hatch, maybe.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. I mean, those Porsche Boxsters, they've literally hit their rock bottom values now. Yeah. It's interesting because on the last podcast, which I think, well, you listened to, Mike, Adam was thinking of getting a Porsche Boxster, wants a Porsche Boxster, because they're just so, they're good fun to drive. And of course, they're mid-engined, the Boxsters.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's interesting. I do agree with you, though, Rob, in the fact that it does need to be something low down. I think something low down convertible, you can't go too wrong. And my answer is going to be quite boring, and you probably already guessed anyway. But I think an MX-5 has got to be the best entry-level car for a track day.
Well, that's why everyone gets them.
I
was going to veto that as an answer because it's just the obvious solution.
I think
I know.
I've been thinking about it though. I think you are right in saying something that is front wheel drive. If you have no racing experience, front wheel drive is probably your friend. Been thinking about it more and more actually. Is that if you got something like an old, even like an old Polo GTI or something, that actually would be, and you stripped that out. Once you'd lost a load of weight from that, stiffened the suspension up, it's not a bad little car to go dragging around a track. Or something like, I mean, I was going to say a Vauxhall Nova, but they're like a classic car now. But something really, really kind of Absolutely, and you don't really want any weight to it. Even something like a Golf is probably a little bit heavy.
I do think
Yeah.
on the Porsche Boxster side of things, one of the issues that it has, and on the face of it, some people may say it's not an issue, but it might be too much power for someone just going to have a little bit of fun and doesn't really know what they're doing on the track.
And my issue with
210
Porsches,
horsepower.
Yeah, and my issue is with Porsche is if anything goes wrong on that
Yeah,
is it may be cheap to buy, but it won't be cheap to fix.
Yeah,
That's the beauty of the MX-5. I know, obviously, it's the go-to choice, and it's not very imaginative or creative.
there's a reason why it's the go-to choice. Is that
exactly?
And there's lots
MX-5
of parts available as well for those amateur racers. People, because it's so popular, you'll always find roll cages, like designed for the chassis. You'll always find the right suspension parts, all of that kind of stuff.
Because the MR2 is sort of in the same category as that, but it's a little bit. People often track day them, that you can get spares for them, you can buy things online for them. They're quite popular, but they're just not as common as the MX-5, so they're not as cheap to buy spares for and things.
If you're a complete lunatic, you could go for something like a Caterham.
Yeah, but they're not cheap, Rob.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like second hand. What are they?
Still expensive. Like you're talking like.
Are they?
You're still talking like, yeah. I bet you can't find one for under $8,000.
Okay, fair enough. No, fair enough.
Like I was surprised because I actually drove a Caterham last year. My friend Max, who might be on the podcast at some stage, he works for Caterham, and there was a pre-production European spec left-hand drive model. Only like, I think it had something silly like 180 brake horsepower, 200 brake horsepower, which a car that light, it went right. It went really fast, and I then fell in love with this idea of owning a Caterham, and I went straight on the internet. I couldn't find one that was any cheap. I mean, even brand new, they're even for a basic model, you're talking like 30k.
Wow.
They're not cheap. They're not cheap. And if you go for like a really expensive one, like a 625 R or whatever, they're really expensive. But they do Caterham, and I'd love to do this as an experience. Actually, Caterham give you the option of whether you want to build your car yourself. Now, it saves you about $2,500, I think, which isn't a lot of money in the grand scheme of things. You may as well pay them to do it. But for the experience of doing that,
it would cost you a lot more in other things like your marriage,
tools, and marriage, and depression,
your job, because you don't actually turn up anymore. You're just building a car every day.
Yeah, but I mean, you guys would agree. I mean, if you don't have to have very fortunate circumstances to be able to do it, but if you could do it, you would give it a go, right? That would be fun to do. I mean, I have spoken to my mate Max about it, and he said he wouldn't recommend doing it. And this is the guy who works for Caterham. Sorry, Caterham, if you're listening.
He would recommend keeping his mates in a job and paying the extra money to let them build it for you.
Yes, pretty much.
Funny
because. That. Yeah. When you phrase it like that, you're not wrong. But unfortunately, these bespoke track cars like Caterham's, Aerial Atoms, they're not cheap. Because they're designed for one purpose and they do it very well.
Yeah.
But you can't use it every day. I mean, I'm not suggesting you use your MX-5 track day car as a limit, but I think something like an MX-5 or maybe an old BMW of some description, your classics, your go-tos, but I think they would teach you the basics of driving and are affordable, I think, or potentially affordable. And I think me and Mike, we will have an offline discussion about maybe some track day potential fun.
What about a Nissan 350?
Going back to Mike's point, I think it might be a bit too powerful, It's got a 3.5 litre V6 in it.
Yeah, no. Oh, that's 310 brake horsepower. They are big. They are rapid.
Yeah.
I mean,
rear-wheel drive, 300 odd horsepower.
Yeah. You could go for something a little bit rogue, and I say rogue, but again, these are both terrible ideas. Actually, I was going to suggest something like an original TT, but they were just a Golf underneath anyway, so it's not really much. But you wouldn't track a Golf though, would you?
People do all the time. Yeah,
I know, but.
People do it. I mean, golf's for twisty country roads in my mind. But if you're starting out, want to learn a bit about racing, then a golf is a little bit heavy. But you could track a Golf if you stripped it out, put a roll cage in it. It would be a fun car to have on it. It would be a fun car to have on a track. Probably wouldn't handle quite as nicely as something like something a bit lower down.
No, I agree. I agree. To be fair, so interesting, right? So, Mike, you suggested a Boxster. I suggested an MX-5. Rob, you suggested something maybe not necessarily rear-wheel drive, could be front-wheel drive, little hot hatch or
Polo
something, or
GTI or a
Polo GTI.
Fiesta or
Yeah,
something that in that range, that size, because you can rip those cars apart. They're made of like nothing. You can rip all the weight out pretty easily,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it's like that is your main problem on track is keeping the weight down. So that's what
Mm,
you want to do. First of all, is lose weight. Second of all, look at the brakes, look at the suspension, and you can do all of that. Like you said, there's definitely the amount of like, especially polos that are slammed by 17-year-olds on like
yeah.
coilovers. You can definitely find like really cheap parts that they will
Mm,
improve your ability to drive on track, and they will go horribly wrong very quickly. But they will be cheap to replace, and they'll teach you something about suspension
mm.
and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'd say something like a small hot hatch would be a good
Could be a
starting
good.
point,
Yeah, I
especially
mean,
for the very
interestingly,
entry level racer, like
yeah.
anything rear wheel drive, like Mike said, especially in the UK. At the moment, the clouds look a little bit grey.
Mm.
You're gonna
I'm
be, yeah.
And what I was going to say, I mean, it would be. I mean, in theory, both your guys' cars, you could easily they'd be good fun on the track. I think. I'm not suggesting it as an entry level model, but you could easily have a good fun. I mean, particularly
You
with
could
Mike's
definitely entry level.
330.
I saw a 330 the other day, £1,600, manual
Really
330. Yeah, 330 Ci. It was it had rusty wheel arches, classic.
classic. Yeah,
But
yeah.
if you wanted to solve that bit of an issue, it's not unachievable. And then going back to the engine
No.
swap thing, you buy yourself a nice Z3, Z4, stick a 3 litre in it. Happy days. It would be a bit
Yeah.
ridiculous again on the power though.
Mm,
For a starting
Yeah.
car, you'd then have 230 odd horsepower in
Mm,
a
mm.
rear-wheel drive roadster, which is fine, but it's for a beginner. I mean,
yeah.
I wouldn't like to do it.
Yeah, no, I'm completely with you, and I definitely wouldn't recommend track daying a jet fighter for the road because,
They're for the
well, a
road, they're not for
Saab
the track.
because
Yeah.
they're for the road exactly. I don't think my Saab would be at home on a track. I'm not gonna lie, it's not really that type of vehicle.
Have you ever seen those
Um,
videos of like people doing like timed runs at the Nürburgring? So when I was looking at getting the Golf, I saw quite a lot of people who've taken their Golf Rs to the Nürburgring. And I mean they're pretty. I mean even on stocks they're sub 10 minutes. Some of these guys in a
mm,
Golf R, and I was like, that's pretty impressive. That's a decent car. But like the amount of people who are there in like their Mondeo estates just taking the kids around, and I'm like, what are you doing? And that like they're not going fast. But there's people in people carriers, there's people
yeah,
in vans. I'm like, what are you doing?
yeah,
Oh, I
but
tell you what,
Rob,
we'll
you
pull
just
over and have a picnic where Nicky Lauda had his crash. What are you doing? It's a racetrack, you halfwit.
Yeah, but the thing is though, the Nurburgring is probably the most famous racetrack in the world, and the fact that anyone can go on it when you pay €15 or whatever is
26
amazing.
euros.
Well, okay, whatever it may be, right? If we When we did the rally, and if we were close to the Nurburgring and we had time, I would have totally taken the Cinquecento around there just to say I've lapped this car around the Nurburgring. Like it
Mm.
doesn't matter about the time, but it's a bit of a laugh. Like if I lived near the
I would have
track,
left
I
you on
would.
your own for that one. I'd have
You
just
would
I'd
what
have gone for a coffee and
you
just been like and booked my flight home and
Yeah,
a
you might have
bag full
needed
of
more than a
bits of
coffee at that point. Would have
I'd
taken
had a coffee, then like called your dad and be like, I'm bringing Sash back in bits. Yeah, I'm not bringing the Cinquecento back. I need a flight. Because like you'd have been nailed by somebody in like a Viper or something.
No, it would have been fun. The thing is, though, mate, wouldn't have been going fast enough to have an accident. I mean, somebody might have crashed into me, but that's beside the point. But I think I'd love to give it a go. But we've sort of digressed slightly. But we've covered the topic about sort of entry level track day cars and stuff like that. And I think, to be honest with you, we've covered a lot of topics today, and we've been going on for a bit, so I'm conscious of time. So I think we'll leave it at that for now. I know we've got another topic. But I think we'll leave that for the next. Yeah, we've got another topic, but we can leave that for another time.
No
I'm sure we'll do that. So, chaps, thank you. Well, to sort of conclude, basically, we found out today that Rob suggests that you don't buy liquid air freshener, that you buy cardboard. We've said that the BMW M3 Estate is a good idea, but that we wouldn't actually buy it ourselves. We also said that the good entry-level track day cars we suggest are a Porsche Boxster, Mazda MX-5, or
Just to
some
clarify,
sort.
I don't suggest the Porsche Boxster. It was just an interesting car that I saw for quite cheap. Yeah,
Point of
the
discussion.
parts of that would just be astronomical in price.
Yeah, no, true, you're right. So, as usual, we've not really solved anything, but that's fine. I
Was
mean,
the
that's
point of this
just
podcast to solve things?
No, it wasn't. But it's just in case anyone was actually coming here for consumer advice, Rob. Which they got one bit, which is about the air freshener.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and that's covered in the first 15 minutes. So, unfortunately, the rest of this hour is a complete waste of time if you're looking for consumer advice. But doesn't matter. Chaps, it's been a pleasure as always. I'm sure we'll talk again soon. And thank you to all the listeners for listening for another episode of Stories with Sash. We'll be back soon. And I think this will be a regular thing. I mean, I don't know whether that. Well, I've suggested that you guys you turn up to these things more often because I think it makes it interesting.
Yeah.
So yes, thank you again all, and join us again soon. I'm sure for another episode of Stories with Sash. Take care, stay well, and don't catch coronavirus.
Wear a mask.
Wear a mask. Yep, got nothing. Leave it at that for now. Ta-da.